Welcome. Today's topic is freedom. So what comes to mind when I say that word? We all have opinions and different ways to look at it. If you're working in a regular job, maybe it's being an entrepreneur, maybe it's the dream of traveling the world. So it can mean many things to many different people. Here in Canada, earlier this year, we had the truckers convoy in Ottawa, and that whole theme was about wanting freedom from rules. And so there was a lot of taking sides and judgments about people and kind of these lines drawn. And, people were unfriending other people on social media, friendships ended, and people really responded and reacted in a lot of unkind ways. And so we saw all this anger and frustration. And this is part of our shadow self. When we don't look at parts of ourselves and kind of address our feelings and let them be known, it goes into our shadow self and it will come out, whether we acknowledge it or not. It may come out in reactivity, withdrawing, lots of different ways. And in general, in the population, there's kind of been this deep anger and grief that we've seen through COVID and the different things that are happening in the world and the different ways of bringing things to people's attention, wanting to right wrongs and change things, which is all good to a certain degree. But at the same time, if we don't deal with that part of ourselves, it can be creating problems in our lives. What happens, we project out onto the world that we don't have freedom because of a constriction that we might have in our lives or some other reason. We can come up with reasons, we're good at that. So we feel that's freedom. When there's an absence of rules, when there's an absence of restrictions, whatever we feel, those are that maybe we feel are not appropriate. And we all have differing opinions on that. So it's one way to look at things. And another way is really seeing freedom, thinking about the bigger picture of not only how does it affect me, but how does it affect other people as well as myself? So I sometimes will kind of sit back or stand back to get a different perspective of how that might look in the bigger picture. So it can also be a good excuse when we kind of react to play out those traumas from our childhood and earlier parts of our life, places where we were hurt or angry or sad and grieving, unhappy, whatever it is. It's one way to express it. And it feels good in the moment, kind of gotten it off of myself. And at the same time, it's not healthy. And we're not being aware of why we're doing what we're doing. And it's not going to resolve the feelings over the long term. That's only temporary relief. I think about road rage and, what is built up to that and, this kind of final straw idea. But it's really that boiling point of not having dealt with the anger. So one of the books that I read as a teenager that really helped me to change my life was Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. And he was a psychiatrist and he created logotherapy. And one of his quotes is, "To live is to suffer, to survive is to find meaning in the suffering." So he was placed in a concentration camp and he saw people being dehumanized and he was able to keep his humanity. So how could he do that? He looked at things in a different way. He knew the only thing he had choice or control over was through himself and what he was thinking and how he looked at things. And so that's really true freedom, right? When we have that choice and we can say, no matter what's going on, I'm going to choose kindness, love, compassion over the fear and hate and anger. And at the same time, we do have to express it. Otherwise, it's unhealthy. So I came from a very dysfunctional family and really saw only two forms of anger. One was my dad, who was rageaholic, alcoholic, and it was explosive rage. It was physical harm. And my mom, who was suicidal and depressed, which is anger turned inward, didn't express it at all, didn't feel safe. So there was no template for me, and I didn't know how to safely express. So we will find ways to deal with it, whether or not we are consciously or unconsciously doing it. So, maybe it shows up as irritation, frustration, anger in not expressing it, so withdrawing, being passive aggressive, raging, yelling, intimidating. My favorite one was the passive aggressive. And so I still have to be careful because that's an easy pattern to fall into. So being aware of that pattern, and when I can feel myself slipping there and say, okay, what's going on? Why am I not feeling safe to express? And how do I need to address that? So that was another form of freedom, reconnecting to my feelings, and then being thrown into the deep end with cancer 22 years ago. And that really opened up all those stuffed down emotions. And I was able to understand and express my feelings more directly. So the meditation and healing system, the conflict resolution training, lots of personal development tools that I learned all helped me to be able to do that more and release some of those unhealthy patterns. So that's another form of freedom to me. And with entrepreneurs, I also see a theme of freedom. And, by leaving that job for being an entrepreneur, that's a sense of I can use my time how I want. And I've equated structure with freedom. So the lack of structure gives me freedom. And then we have no structure or way to evaluate how we use our time. So we inherently know that we don't use time well. We don't understand time. We're often not in sync with it. And, we have all these plans. And at the end of the day, so often we think, where did the day go? We easily overestimate what we can do in any given time period. And we also need to learn to be more self-sufficient as entrepreneurs. So, I can't just call up an IT department if I'm having computer problems or tech issues. Maybe I have to hire a company, or maybe I have to figure something out. So there's different ways and different things that come up for us. So when we can actually build in some structure and guide our way through our day and what we need to do, that actually offers more freedom, because we can get things done that we need to with our business and not overdo it and have that time for ourselves. So it's a process of really looking at that and what's important to us. And that's why I love the motivational map system. That really helps us to uncover those patterns and what gives us energy, what takes energy away, what motivates us, because motivation is energy. It's that ability to get things done that I want to get done. And so the motivational map is based on Shine's Career Anchors, Maslow's Hierarchy of Needs, and the Enneagram. And it's also ISO approved, and gives us that precision to really understand what's going on, how do we feel about what we're doing, and how I can move things and alter my way of looking at things to really help me and support me. And because I saw that precision and the elegance of the system, I went for a deep dive into the Enneagram. And I'm really so happy that I did. I find it such an amazing dynamic tool for us to see how we get lost in our personality, how we live on autopilot so much of our life, and really offers a tool and a way for us to be more present to what's going on in the moment and understand why we do what we do, and move beyond that to that deeper part of ourselves, and find ways to really be more present to all of life. So there's 9 types or styles or points, however you would like to say it. And the point 7, and we all have each of the types within us, and we have access to the learning from all of it. So the 0.7, it represents infinite potential and freedom. And so when we can really be in the correct mind space where we're accepting, it is very open-ended. Not the thinking we usually think of as thinking, which is often a position, an opinion, sometimes a looping thought process. It's not really thinking, right? We're just in our head and we're going around. And so when we can actually bring that freedom, that idea of this infinite potential that's in the world, and actually bring it more into our human life, that brings us vision to see how things can be different, and we have that bigger picture. So we're not so tied to having things happen in a certain way, and it's not just about my own preferences of what I'd like. I have more acceptance. And the problem is the ego doesn't like that, right? It doesn't like that open-endedness. It wants container, it wants boundaries. So what happens is that we react against things. And so what happens is we create more options, more choices, because it feels like choices and options substitute for that real inner freedom. And so we end up stuffing in experiences and not really taking them in. So there can be an emptiness, right? And we want more. And, you know, for entrepreneurs and just in life in general, shiny object syndrome. What's the next thing? In the motivational map system, we talk about high growth, how we're always looking to the future. So how can we relax out of that drive to get more experience, and drop into the stillness, into the quiet? And this is when those creative ideas emerge, and we can feel freedom, the trust, and really feel positive about taking life on in all different ways, and even when there's tough emotions. So it gives us more capacity to do that, which is resilience. So our direct experience of freedom is not about something external. It is in our nature as human beings. We have access to that, just like Viktor Frankl talked about. And so when we can be more present to what is going on in the moment and open to those endless possibilities, we can flow more with it and not be fighting things so much and wanting to add more and wanting it to be a different way. So that's true freedom. When we can say, you know, I choose to be my full self, have my feelings, and whatever I am and I'm doing is okay. I don't have to buy into these ideas that freedom is external and is about what restrictions or openness I have to what I want to do in my life. So it's about our being with freedom. And so it's almost like a verb rather than just a noun, right? It's that place of just by being in the world and connected to it, that is freedom, that I can be myself in whatever way that looks for me. So I hope I gave you some ideas to think about and ponder today, and I will see you next time. Thanks for being here.